Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today at Penobscot Marine Museum. Please leave your questions and comments below. We love hearing from you. This is the ship Red Jacket, a clipper ship built in Rockland in 1853 by Deacon George Thomas, active in the founding of the Second Baptist Church in Rockland's North End. This is another painting by Penobscot Bay artist Percy Sanborn. We talked about him a few weeks ago. When Red Jacket was launched, the ship was so streamlined, it slid right across Lerman's Cove and stove in the side of Warrior, a schooner that was trying to load lime. Red Jacket is named for Sagoyewatha. We'll talk about him a little later. On Red Jacket's first voyage, sailing from New York to Liverpool in January of 1854, the clipper set a record which still stands today. It took only 13 days, 1 hour to cross the Atlantic. Clipper ships were extra fast. That was crucial for packet ships like this one, carrying mail or passengers. Extra sails are part of what makes them go so fast. And you can see in this image some of those extra sails billowing out, in addition to regular sails that a full-rigged ship would have. This takes extra crew, however, and it's therefore more expensive. Red Jacket had a crew of 65, as opposed to the 30 that a downeaster would more typically require. So these ships were only worth the extra expense for cargo where timing was important and where there was a lot of money to be made, such as in carrying tea from Asia to Britain or gold from California. In the case of Red Jacket, immigrants, the cargo themselves, were charged a hefty fee. The first clipper ships were designed by Donald McKay, a Boston naval architect. Also, at the same time that shipbuilders were making advances in speed design, Maury published the most extensive charts yet in 1848 with data of winds and currents compiled from thousands of voyages along sea routes at all different times of the year. So having this crucial information also reduced sail times for all ships. This is an ad for Red Jacket. The very next trip that Red Jacket took in May of 1854 was to go to Melbourne, Australia with 450 immigrants. On their trip back home, they got trapped in ice for 4 days off the tip of Cape Horn, which you can see here illustrated by Currier and Ives. I love the penguins.
Sarah, while we're looking at the print, I wanted to do a shout out to Randall and Marcia and Virginia. Thank you for the likes and for watching.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us today. Red Jacket is named for the great Seneca leader Sagoyewatha, who was born sometime around 1758 and lived till about 1830. His name means he causes them to be awake. White people called him Red Jacket. He argued for Native people to stay neutral in the American Revolution, but his people chose to side with the British. So he became a dispatch courier for the British in the Revolutionary War. He helped negotiate peace at the end of the war and continued to be a leader and defender of Native culture. Spokesman for the Iroquois Confederacy of 50 sachems, Sagoyewatha advocated for the rights of his people for years through the founding of the new United States. He said, "We have always lost by taking up the hatchet. Even the British, upon whom we pinned our hopes, sold our land to the Americans after every war in which we were allied with them. In the War of 1812, his people chose to side with the Americans. He continued to advocate for his people for the rest of his life and was known as a great orator. So I'm going to read you some excerpts from one of his more famous speeches that he gave. Brother, listen to what we say. There was a time when our forefathers owned this great island. Their seats extended from the rising to the setting sun. Your forefathers crossed the great waters and landed on this island. Their numbers were small. They found friends, not enemies. They told us they had fled from their own country for fear of wicked men and come here to enjoy their religion. They asked for a small seat. We took pity on them, granted their request, and they sat down amongst us. We gave them corn and meat. They gave us poison in return. The white people had now found our country. Tidings were carried back, and more came amongst us. Yet we did not fear them. We took them to be friends. They called us brothers. We believed them and gave them a larger seat. At length, their numbers had greatly increased. They wanted more land. They wanted our country. Our eyes were opened and our minds became uneasy. Wars took place. Indians were hired to fight against Indians, and many of our people were destroyed. Brother, our seats were once large and yours were very small. You have now become a great people, and we have scarcely a place left to spread our blankets. You have got our country, but are not satisfied. You want to force your religion upon us. How shall we know when to believe, being so often deceived by the white people? Brother, you say there is only one way to worship and serve the Great Spirit, but if there's but one religion, why do you white people differ so much about it? Why not all agree? We are told that your religion was given to your forefathers and has been handed down from father to son. We also have a religion which was given to our forefathers and has been handed down to us, their children. We worship that way. It teaches us to be thankful for all the favors we receive, to love each other, and to be united. Brother, we do not wish to destroy your religion or take it from you. We only want to enjoy our own. We are told that you've been preaching to the white people in this place. These people are our neighbors. We are acquainted with them. We will wait a little while and see what effect your preaching has upon them. If we find it does them good, makes them honest and less disposed to cheat Indians, we will then consider what you have said. So our last image is a little bit different. This is Elmer Montgomery. He is working on a model of the ship, Red Jacket. He was born in Owl's Head, Maine in 1912. He loved boats, boat building, and hanging out at the Rockland waterfront. And we have some of his boat models in our collection. He's been like a favorite uncle, said Maynard Bray of Elmer Montgomery a few days after Elmer's death in 1997. The following are a few more excerpts from Maynard's words that day. Partly because we had no car during the war years, the Bray family rarely went anywhere to visit. So our frequent walks from Mechanic Street to the Hill on weekends were big occasions for me, and getting to go inside Elmer's coop was always the highlight. While Elmer was away in service, Mom and Dad would both be sitting at Aunt Helen's living room, where the model of the whale ship Elmer had built was encased. I wasn't much interested in the gossip, So I spent the time looking at that wonderful model, and I can recall it vividly, even now, though it's been years since I've laid eyes on it. Dad took me over to see the creation of Elmer's outboard boat. I think those were the first steamed oak frames I ever saw being bent. And it seems to me he only used a tea kettle over a hot plate for a steam source. The second floor of the barn became the boat shop for this project. This was during the time Elmer was courting. So there were some nights nothing went on at all, and our trip would be an encounter with Aunt Helen, who would simply tell us that this was a courting night. I was enthralled with the boat building process, which for the first time I'd seen happen from beginning to end. Elmer was fussy and patient, and I loved that approach because when finished, his work looked so good and was so admired by the people who saw it. It was soon apparent from our runs in company with Elmer and his new bride in their boat, and from a couple of scary times in choppy waters, that we needed a boat more like his. So with Elmer's guidance, Dad ordered a brand new one. I watched that boat grow from a half model to a real boat, just as I had Elmer's, and it was a dandy. We loved it, but only had it for a year or two before Dad had his first heart attack around 1949 or 50, and we had to sell both the boat and the cottage. I loved looking through Elmer's photo albums, filled with sailing vessels, which he'd captured so beautifully with his camera. I visited often, too often, no doubt, as I think about how I invaded the quarters of those newlyweds. Then I got a driver's license. Dad bought a '39 Plymouth, and I discovered girls. Boats, woodworking, books, no way. In my junior and senior years, I worked at Nelson Brothers Garage. I souped up the family Plymouth. Mom and Dad spent some sleepless nights those teen years, I regret to say. Anne entered my life in the fall of 1951. I borrowed Don Merchant's boat, Seawolf, and took Anne sailing that first summer of 1952. First time for her, and she so loved it that to keep her, I went back to boats. Boats stuck us together like contact cement and have remained a primary focus for us to this day. Elmer Montgomery played a vital role, as had my father. Dad died way too young, but his support and encouragement while alive was always there. For example, he paid Elmer to build a 10-foot dory skiff. The deal was that Elmer would build it in our garage and that I'd help him all the way. With that project, I went from observer to participant. And Truman fired MacArthur while we were putting on the planks. Elmer taught me patience, an appreciation for craftsmanship, and a passion for boats and ships. We've enjoyed many a chat about wooden boats and other things nautical. He's been like a favorite uncle. I'll miss him terribly. Thank you ever so much for joining us today at Penobscot Marine Museum. Next week, whales and other Arctic animals, and a glimpse into the life of everyday sailors. Thank you to our members and our donors for making these presentations possible. This programming has been made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities, Exploring the Human Endeavor.